Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Wilder Napalm. So, within this film, we get a very unusual film. We have Dennis Quaid, who is to be a clown half the time in this film. We also have two brothers that are to have the same ability to be able to uh, control and produce fire or flame, and they are to come off as a like kind of Ghost Rider or like a Human Torch kind of character. And so like, or you could kind of reference like Dragon Ball Z, Hadoukens and Street Fighters and whichever, to of course go on and like compare this movie to anything you've gone on and seen in other things. So we also have a fire department that consistently goes on and is to sing like a barbershop quartet. So if that isn't all very much weird, I of course at one point was to go on, and when I was very young, I was to see this movie late at night one night. And so I didn't know at whatsoever what the name of this movie was. Like I didn't like know how to figure out how to find this movie at some point. And so finally today I was to go on and figure out the title of this movie, figure out what it was, because like this movie is so unique. I have to go on and rewatch it. I have to see it again, because to me, like I was like, I just need to see this. It's just a thing that I need in my life to have fully seen this movie, because I only got some good parts and pieces of this film before. So, with that said, what is this movie about? So, we have, of course, Wilder, who is to be this photo booth working guy who also is to be a volunteer firefighter. And he, of course, is to have a brother who is to be Wallace, who is to be a circus performing clown or amusement park clown. And so, come to find out, these brothers have not seen one another in about 5 years. So, come to find out, there is a whole reasoning for that, as the reasons start to build up in this film. We have them, of course, consistently going into having fights where one would set fire to another's hair, causing, of course, Wilder to then be permanently bald for the rest of his life, wearing toupees to hide the fact that, of course, he has these burnt scars upon his head. And so we are to also have a thing that happened between the two of them when they were kids, which I'll go into more about in spoilers somewhere in there. So, but then also the biggest thing is that both of them were to want one girl, and of course, at the end of it all, one person was to get it, and so now the other brother, of course, is to hate this brother for just simply having the girl that he wanted. So, with that said, that ends up kind of carrying most of this film, this grudge that has been held between these two brothers for 5 years, to the point of them wanting to finally use their special abilities to put fire and flame between them to fight it out, finally. So, with that said, this movie is simple, but I thought it was so fun. Like, I thought that this was a solid, okay film. The only thing like wrong about it is it's just a simple film. But this movie is also just really unique. Plus, it's a movie that is to obviously there's some parts about it that just doesn't hold up. but because of the time period and whichever, like we don't have like photo booths anymore that are to have people come and get their photos developed. So if anything, if they probably rewrote this, like we would just have Wilder's character who was just strictly a firefighter, and that would just be who he would be. And at some point, like we would just still have Wilder and Wallace who would still bump into one another through a fire that is to just be nearby. Maybe I don't know. As if I'm writing the remake of this film for whatever reason. As if a movie like Wilder Napalm needs to have to be rebooted and keep the name because that's odd enough. So, with that said, if I didn't explain this already, this movie is available on Tubi, Tubi, or Vudu, VUDU, for absolutely free. So, with that said, let's just go on into spoilers because I feel that like that was like as much tee up as I can go on and do with this film because there's a lot to go on and a lot to explain. So with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into that double five time territory. It's about that time yet again to, of course, go to spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time you spoil this movie. So we have Wallace, who is to bizarrely when he is in this clown character, he's to desperately needed to be called Biff, as if he is some Back to the Future villain. So Biff is to be using his finger as a gun to pop off these fireworks from off of his finger, and the snake lady is going on and reading Biff the TV guide, getting him ready for his David Letterman appearance. Because, of course, Wallace has this special ability to manipulate and use flame, and so it's finally Wallace's time for him to turn around and become rich and famous from being this carny. So, we have at one point Rex, who is played by Jim Varney, who a lot of people know him as Ernest. Like, it's kind of funny, he has this one, like, tank top on, and it's, like, FBI, but it's, like, female body inspector. I thought that was funny. But so Rex goes on and had, like, we consistently have this character who is spending a lot of the, amusement park resources to buy all this equipment and to, post bail at some point in this film. So, like, he's blowing a lot of money here. So, Rex is to take and put liens on certain rides to get this certain fireproof suit, which we'll see in, like, the later half of the film. So, gearing up for them to go on and finally showcase Dr. Napalm, which I guess is to be Biff's stage name. So we've gone into that. So we have Wilder, who is kind of waking up for his day, getting ready to go to his photo booth, and seems happy-go-lucky, as well as always having a wife that is to be feisty and is to just desperately want her husband everywhere in the house. Like, hey, how about we do the roof? How do we go here? How about we go there? And so we have Wilder that's just like, wait a minute. Like, wait a minute. Let's go on and let's just go to bed like a traditional couple. So Wilder ends up coming home, and we come to find out that Vida is to be wielding this uh God, what is the word? Bracelet that, of course, is a state that she is to be like stay at home at all times. This like house prison thing. I don't remember what the actual term of it is. So Vida is now counting down the days for her to then get free of this ankle bracelet. So she, of course, can go on and see a symphony or be able to just go out anywhere, just go anywhere because she's getting cabin fever. So we go on, and so Wilder, of course, is to go to work the next day after being with his wife and and having them sleep together. So we have Vida, who is making Wilder breakfast, and it seems that Vida had gone on and done quite a bit of musical notes on Wilder's back. And so Wilder goes off to work, and it seemed that they also were to have Vida take off Wilder's like toupee because she's completely comfortable with Wilder having this bald head, because she's like, yeah, like this is the man I married. So we go on, and so after Wilder is to get his breakfast, to get his toupee and everything like that on, to get ready for work, he goes to his photo booth, and we have come to find out that the circus is in town. The same parking lot that Wilder is to have this photo booth, we now are to, of course, have the circus be in town, and they're setting everything up. So Wilder, who is realizing that he's losing his air conditioning because the same pole that is to be attached to his electricity to get his air conditioning working, we have Rex, who is hooking into it, trying to power all of their circus items and light it all up. So we have Wilder and we have Rex, who are going back and forth and trying to hook up things and unhook things, to the point of the elephant going on and pushing against this phone booth, trying to knock it over. So that, of course, is when Wallace is to find out that Wilder is out here, and Wallace is with his snake lady, and Wallace has realized that it's been 5 years since he's talked to his brother. And so, come to find out, I'm going to state why that is. So, beyond everything that is to go on through this movie, there's so many stories that we have both the brothers that end up they had a fight between one another, and at Wilder's bachelor party, Wallace ends up setting Wilder's head ablaze, and that, of course, was to uh, go on and have this character permanently lose all of his hair to where he gets a toupee. So, and not only that, but then when Wilder and Wallace were both kids, we have them go and meet up with a kid named Horace Braintree. And this kid is mentioning about this shed, this shack that he has. And so they're like, oh, okay, well, like, that's great that you have this, because we're just going to set it ablaze. And so we have both these characters that are using their powers to blow up this shack, and come to find out that there was still a person inside of it who is obviously now dead. So the fire department pulls him out, and then Wilder now realizes what a mistake that they had made, and that they should never go on and use their abilities again. Like, Wilder completely stops ever becoming a person who is to use his abilities, and instead is to be a firefighter. Beyond him just working at this photo booth, he volunteers as a firefighter, and we'll see that fairly soon here. So, while Wilder was leaving for the day to head to his work, Vida asked Wilder, it's like, well, what is it going to take for you to come running back home and ditch work? And Wilder is to state, if Vida goes on and burns down the whole entire house, then he'll come back. So, but now we're back, of course, with Wilder and Rex kind of messing with this whole pole to get their air conditioner or to get their circus lights working. So Wallace finally confronts Wilder, who I guess is to be now Biff, because he's in the clown getup. So we have Wallace who is seeing Wilder. It's like, has it like how long has it been? Like, Wilder, how long has it been? And it's like, yeah, it's been 5 years. So we have Wallace who is to showcase to Wilder that he is now a clown working for the circus. And so Wallace is making a crack on how Wilder is to have this crappy job. And so immediately he's to say, it's like, well, yeah, like of course you'd have this like really crappy job because of course like you're not doing anything to win over your wife. So Wilder is to go on and state to Wallace is like, you're a clown. Like, how much better are you than me? Like, you have a ridiculous job also. So they're popping shots between one another. And so Rex mentions that they're having a problem with Wilder wanting to keep his air conditioning running. And so Wallace ends up using his ability to melt down this air conditioner. So the one thing that Wilder needs power for, that thing is now destroyed. So we turn around here, and so like the circus performers are going on and putting on this circus, and so we have Wallace, of course, who is to start to realize that he's like, you know what, like I'm gonna try to win that girl back. I'm gonna try to win Vida back. I'm gonna try this. So after it seems that Wilder is so busy with being a firefighter, because Wilder ends up getting a call or ends up getting a like him just running to this fire truck as they're saying like, hey man, like we have another job. So Wilder gets on all his gear to find out that his house is burning down. But really what's burning down is to be a part of his yard. And so Wilder and the firefighters are to quickly go on and douse out this fire with these fire extinguishers. And the fire chief goes to Vida and it's like, well, hey, like, did you go on and try to put this fire together? Like, was it not a real accident? Were you just trying to get us here? And Vida's like, no, it was an accident. And we have Wilder, who is to see, like, the cigarette butt, and so he puts it in his pocket to just try to hide the fact that Vida was trying to put out this fire. So Vida grabs Wilder and is to have him bring the helmet and the boots back home, so they can role play later on. And so after Wilder is to go on and do some like firefighter jobs where he has this kind of stick and he's bashing into this roof, and he ends up dropping the stick and almost falls in his fire chief. And we start to realize more and more that like Wilder is like having trouble doing his job when he's consistently further and further closer to any flame. So we have Wallace that goes on and meets up with Vida while Wilder's working. So Wallace is to bring Vida flowers, and so Wallace is to be upset that Vida like didn't know that Wallace was in town, because Wallace tells tells Vida, it's like, well, hey, like I talked to him like the day before. We also had at some point where Wallace like calls Wilder's place and Vida picks up and he kind of hangs up the phone. So while Wallace is talking to Vida and they go on and have these exchanges, and we had at one point where Vida, I think in the later part of the film, but I'm going to do this story anyways now, where Vida goes on and talks about why she ended up getting arrested. Because it seems that Wilder was doing these odd jobs, and he was to do this kind of like snow shoveling job. And so Vida was to notice that this one house had this like thick thing of ice. And so Vida just decides to pour this gasoline on the sidewalk and set it ablaze. And thinking that like, oh, okay, well, like this could easily and quickly melt this ice. But then come to find out the house started to get it or go into bursting into flame also. So Vida, of course, ended up getting arrested for arson because Vida was just wanting Wilder to use his abilities and he doesn't. We also had a point where Vida was trying to get both Wilder and Wallace to use their abilities to light her cigarette, and Wilder could do it, but it seemed that Wallace had a problem that he couldn't do it because like it would just like burn this girl's face off in the process. So it seems that Wallace doesn't have a real like good control on it, where it seems that Wilder does, even though he could be out of practice. So we have the rest of the fire department and Wilder that make their way to Wilder's house. And so Vida is to drop and have the fire department catch her. So we have the fire department that are all kind of drinking lemonade and singing this song as like Vida is getting like is showing the goods right in a lot of guys' faces. So we have Vida that's just singing and dancing along with these guys, and Wallace is kind of looking at Wilder like, like I was alone with your wife, like with his eyes, he was saying that. So we then have Vida finally sitting on Wilder's lap, and in Wilder's eyes, you can just see it's like, hey, I don't care, like she's mine, and hey, I have this woman, like you don't. So again, there's just like between them, there's just this like between both of them, and Vida is realizing that this is ruining her mood as she's looking at both of them just kind of condescendingly, just like I effing one another, I effing one another over in a better sense. So Vida is just like, you guys suck. So we then later have Wilder who's fixing his car. Wallace goes over to see that it's like, what's wrong with his car? And Wilder's like, I don't even know. So Wallace is like, this car like perfectly like represents you, Wilder, because you're going nowhere. And so Wallace is to now finally tell Wilde that the only reason why he came into town and was to talk to his own brother was to tell him that he's going to Hollywood. He's going to take this ability and make a fortune on it, because Wallace was to turn to Vida and tell her this story that one night Wallace was to be eating like cereal out of a box and realizing like that he like doesn't have two pennies to rub together. And so Wallace is just kind of like, what am I doing? Like, why can't I go on and just use this ability to benefit me? As Wallace had gone on to watch shows like Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie, and he's like, I should go on and use this ability. And I know a lot of these conversations at some point don't happen in the early part of this film. I'm just stretching from every conversation that happens in this movie somewhere. But so check out the movie and you can get every single conversation when it happens. But so, like, I just wanted to get certain bits of dialogue out to talk about all of them. So Wallace is talking to Wilder and stating that he wants to go to Hollywood, and Wilder's like, no. Like, think about it. Like, if anyone is to have gone on and realized that you have this ability, they're going to connect you to any fire that has ever like happened within this town that never made sense, that never added up. And they would go on and they would accuse you of those fires. But not only that, like, Wilder is to also tell Wallace about, like, well, did you ever, like, you saw a fire starter, right? You know that someone's going to go on and take you and experiment you and dissect you and figure out how you have this ability, or they're going to take you away forever and so on and so forth. And so Wallace is like, well, I'll take that risk. So Wallace goes off and like he's still like, we're going to Hollywood, we're gonna make it, we're gonna do it. So we have, of course, Vida, who is on her last days of house prison, home jail. Yeah. So we have, of course, Wilder, who is stating that he needs to go on and do bingo and all these other things, because, of course, like, he can't just drop everything for Vida on her one day that she is finally to go on and be free. Vida is to have the sheriff and the deputy come in, and she accidentally opens this door and smacks the sheriff in the nose, breaking his nose. So they unhook her. House arrest. That's what I was trying to say. House arrest. Finally. So Vida is to just feel like, I want to run. I want to go. I want to be somewhere. I want to go through the town and just paint the town red because I can. So Wilder is going on and doing his job, and he's at this photo booth, and we have Wallace that is realizing that he's feeling a little bit ill, that he wants to go on and get rid of his makeup because he wants to go on, and instead he would rather go on and do things with Vida. And like, also there's a battle that's going to happen between the two of these brothers. It's imminent. So we have Vida that is to talk to Wilder. It's like, hey, how about we do it in the photo booth right now? And Wilder's like, I'm working. Like, I might have a supervisor come in and check on me. And Vida's like, come on, like we can do it right here. And Wilder's like, no, like, I'm working. So Vida walks away to all of a sudden have Wallace, who is to state that he's like, hey, I have some symphony tickets. You want to come with me? So Vida, of course, agrees to this, goes to this concert, and then afterwards, we have Wallace, who's claiming that Vida can him and her go and see this fireworks. And Vida's like, I don't know, it's getting kind of late. Wilder's gonna chew my head off. And so Wallace is like, but hey, fireworks. So Vida and Wallace go to this putt-putt, this little golf game thing. So we have them further, like, talking about things. And so most of the dialogue I've pretty much already stated or I've said at some point. So, like, a lot of this is just kind of me just stating what happens at this event. So as Vida is doing really well, we still have Wallace, who wants to go on and show her how to swing her club. Okay? So Vida, it seems, with Wallace is to kind of lose control because this girl has a libido like nobody's business. So all of a sudden they end up getting so close to one another that they all of a sudden are starting to kiss. And everything is starting to freak out heat wise around them because Wallace, of course, when he is to get heated up, everything around him starts to melt down. And like we have a kid's ice cream who melts, we have all these things that start melting around them. The water starts to boil. And so all of a sudden we start to have a bunch of these putt putt like things that all start bursting into flame and exploding. So as they're continuing to kiss and kiss and kiss in this circular motion, kind of like I was just to watch the House of Living Dead, and like I would see them doing this like circular thing over and over again. I'm like, man, this reminded me of that other film. So Vine and Wallace are to stop kissing, and Wallace is like, whoops. So they run out of there. Wilder goes on with the fire department to put down this fire at this putt putt golf. So they go on and have our characters sing the song "I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire," which of course a lot of people probably hear in the one video game Fallout at some point. That song ends up coming up often in that video game. I think it's like Fallout 3. It's been a while. So I was expecting like the same exact music to be in every one of the other like Fallout games, but I guess that wouldn't be the case because like I'm sure they'd be like, man, like people are getting annoyed with that music because they would have to go on through all these locations and spend a lot of time in the game, and you would just hear the same 4 or 5 songs or whatever over and over and over again. But anyways, so we have Wilder after his night. We also saw Wilder while he was at his photo booth is realizing that the snake lady is to walk off and get a cab because she is done. Like we had Wallace who was to kind of like let's get rid of her. So Wilder makes his way home again with his orange juice in hand, and we all of a sudden see some thumping going on in the roof of this house, and all of a sudden, Wilder is to see that the orange juice is bubbling on the ground, that these candles are to now be lit, and then the whole wax melts, and that is to go on and tell Wilder that's like, oh my god, my brother's here, and if somebody's on the roof, they're probably doing it. So Wilder goes on, grabs this ladder, pushes it away from the roof, and then just goes and takes his tractor and continues to just circle around this house for seemingly the whole morning. Like from night to the whole morning. So Vida and Wallace can't get off the roof, so they basically sleep up there. Finally, Wallace just jumps off the roof, and like there isn't like a huge gap, so he kind of just falls, and so he ends up getting the ladder, and so Wallace and Vida go in to just make breakfast, and Vida keeps screaming to Wilder like, "Can't you just do something? Can't you just say something? Can't you just like be angry, be upset, be something?" So finally we have to a point where Wallace goes on and he's really getting in Wilder's face. And so Wallace is saying to Wilder, it's like, hey, I'm eating your breakfast, and like, can't you just punch me? Like, can't you just resolve this? And so finally we have Wilder who grabs Wallace and pushes him out of the window, and they finally start fighting for once. But Wilder just uses his hands and consistently punches Wallace, to where, of course, Wallace is to use his firepower. And so we have Wilder that is to drop this tractor on top of Wallace's body where it's going to grind up his manhood. So Wilder is trying to turn on this tractor and it's not working, and Vida is to try to push Wilder off Wallace so like Wilder doesn't kill his brother, and Wallace uses his power to explode this tractor off of him. So we have Wallace who uses his fire ability to make this kind of little indent of a body of Wilder going on and putting both of his hands up to kind of make this kind of like whoa. And so Wallace is to have this kind of trail that copies that. So Wilder and Wallace are fighting. Vida is to tell him like, well, hey, like, do whatever you guys are gonna do, but don't do it near the house. Like, we live here. So, but they continue to fight anyways. So Wilder is punching, Wallace is to be falling down, and he is to like explode on the ground with all this fire. So Wilder ends up going into the underneath part of their house because there's kind of metal there's metal sheeting down there, and also considering how small this area is, they can kind of like fight in smaller quarters. So we have Wilder that's running around his house. Wallace follows as he is to kind of flame on like his fingertips so that we can see where he's going. So Wallace wants finally Wilder to like, hey, like, let's put out all the stops. Like, come on, like, use your real power. So we end up having at one point where there's a fireball that ends up going through the floor, and Vida ends up screaming. And so Wilder and Wallace are making the clear consensus like, well, is Vida okay? So Wallace ends up popping his head to end up getting a face full of fire extinguisher. And so then Wallace goes down and he's like, ah, plah. So we have Wilder that goes on to bash Wallace in the back of the head with this pipe that is kind of on the kind of the top part of this the bottom of the house. Weird way to try to say that. So Wilder tries to run away from his brother, so Wallace uses this fireball and is to trying to hit his brother, but instead it ends up going on and hitting these propane tanks, which of course then explode. So Vida is to now try to call the fire department to say it's like, well, hey, like we have the usual problem here, like come on down, like help me out. So they have the police and they have the fire department, and so they go on, and both the brothers are finding it out, and so they finally give themselves up to the police, and everyone gets arrested. Vida gets arrested, Wallace gets arrested, Wilder gets arrested. So we have Vida who goes on and apologizes, and Wallace is like you didn't do anything wrong, and Vida's like, not from you, stupid. So oh, we also had the one funny thing when Wallace was to get upset, where he mentions, like, hey, buy a reef because you're dead. Stating that normally when you would go on and, like, you would have a funeral for someone, you would usually buy a reef to, like, put by their grave. So I just thought that joke was kind of funny, but then going on and explaining it, but still. So we also had, like, Wallace continues to go on and do these, like, cowboy, like, finger gun things, but I guess that's just the one way that he mostly uses his power. But so all three of these characters are now in jail. They're arrested. So we have Vida that is wanting to go on and apologize to Wilder because she made a mistake. She realized that. And Wilder wants nothing to do with either Wallace or Vida. He's like, F the both of you. Like, I'm done. Like, you've cost me my job, you've cost me my house, you've cost me everything. So, uh, we have Rex coming in to put bail for Wallace, and Wallace is going to go until Rex puts bail for Vida, and Vida doesn't go unless Rex puts bail for Wilder. So now Rex is like, man, this is getting really expensive. Like, I'm gonna have to like sell off like a bunch of like circus like rides and whatever to like pay off all of this bail. So but we still don't even have Wilder who like accepts the bail because he still wants nothing to do with Vida. And as Vida is walking off, Vida states to Wilder, "It's like, well, hey, if you're gonna go on and you want me, like, you're gonna have to fight for me." So Vida goes on and is to put a bunch of notes in Wilder's photo booth because that's the only place that he would go to because that's the only place he has left. So, uh, and this is when we also have Wallace who is to kind of put away his clown makeup, realizing there's going to be like a fight ahead, and he wants to like use this time to kind of save his energy for the fight he's going to have. So Wilder then goes on to his photo booth and is just sleeping there. And Wilder all of a sudden then sees some of the notes, but not all of them. So we have Wilder who is just resting, and all of a sudden Wallace is to put the speaker next to Wilder's photo booth and is to blare this song. She's she's a winner, talking about. Anyways, so uh, and the lady is mine. Anyways, so uh, we have Wallace who's like dancing around to this song in his trailer. And so Rex is thinking, it's like, hey, are we going to have to go back and forth again to fight with this guy? Or we're going to have to bring in the elephant again? So Wilder is to finally be at a breaking point where he's like, you know what? Like, I'm sleeping in a photo booth. This is crazy. So Wilder gets out and he's like, you know what? Like, I'm fighting. I'm going to fight now. Like, I'm going to fight for Vida. So Wilder is like, where is he? Like, I want him. Like, give him to me. So Wallace comes out of his trailer, and so Wilder is asking Wallace, where is Vida? And Wallace says Vida is going on to the store to buy a bunch of condoms because they're going to get busy tonight, so on and so forth. And Wilder is just go on and just like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to start blowing up yours. So Wilder goes on to blow up Wallace's truck. And so they're like, okay, all right. So the more and more that Wallace is to come up with some goofy thing that it's to not be the right answer, Wallace tries to blow up more things to the point they get further and further into this trailer, and they like put a fireball into one part of the trailer. So we of course are to have Rex who's calling the fire department and saying like, yeah, hey man, let's get some fire extinguishers because it's going down. So we have this trailer that just explodes, and so the fire department's there, the people of the town are there. So Vinus thinks like, oh my god, are they finally dead? Come to find out, both of them are wearing fire retardant suits. So both of them come out in these suits, and so it's like, okay, so that's going to justify like these characters aren't going to start to get like burnt clothes or whatever for this fight. So it like there's a justification here. So we have Wallace and we have Wilder, and so now that Wallace is to be all like flame on and he has his own suit and so on and so forth, we have Wilder now seeing that Vida is here. We have Wilder that's like, you know what? Like, I think I want to give up now. Like, I think I want to go on and just take my wife on the Tilt-A-Whirl. And so Wilder is to blow that up. And so Wilder's like, well, how about I go on to this ride? And Wallace blows it up. So Wilder is still like, you know what? I still just don't want to fight you. Like, I just don't want to do it anymore. So we finally just have Wallace who takes this fireball that he used to go on and do and like blasts Wilder with it, and he falls over, and now he's stuck in this road because he melted into the road. Vida is trying to grab him out to try to see if he's okay, and Wilder is to tell Vida like, hey, just pull out my hand. So Wilder can hit Wallace with this one thing that kind of sets him back pretty far and kind of crashes him through this wall. And all of Rex and all the guys are like, oh my god, like he like destroyed everything from this circus. So Wilder is to assess that maybe Wallace is now dead, that he killed him with that impact. So we have Wilder that is checking of whether or not the Wallace is dead. And Wallace comes out like all in flame. And so Wallace is to now like, hey, yeah, let's fight it out. Come on, you and me. And so Wilder is just like, no. Like, I think we're done here. So we just have the fire department that just goes on and just douses these guys with water. And so now we get to a point where Wallace can't even use his power if he wanted to. And so Wilder picks up Wallace and hugs him, and then Wilder tells Wallace, it's like, well, hey, you get what you want after all, because people know we have this ability now. Like, it's all over everywhere. Like, the whole town knows about it. And so, like, now you can go public with this. You have my permission. So, you have my, like, acceptance that you can go on and do this because we went public with our power. So, we have Wilder that takes off with Vida and just leaves, and that just has us accept that Wallace is now defeated. So we then turn around and have Wallace, who does go on to David Letterman, as Vida is telling Wilder, like, hey, come on, he's on, his segment's on, and it's like, already? So Wilder goes on and watches the David Letterman segment. It's like, all right, so he got what he wanted after all. Come to find out, after some time had passed, we have Vida and Wilder's home that, of course, is to now be put together from Wallace. And so it's like, well, hey, yeah, here's some money because I burnt down your house. Like, here's your house. So by the end of this film, we have the fire department coming in again, and they end up singing this Heat Wave song, and then kind of rolling us out into credits as we have both Vida and we have Wilder, who's getting hot and heavy. So figure to do a transition to kind of end this film. So with that said, let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot about. I'm sure that there is probably a scene here or there that I probably forgot about or didn't get in the right order. But I think I covered most of this movie. Like, there's some battle stuff and there's some fights and there's some certain things that I just kind of wanted to quickly wrap up. Oh, we also had Wallace, who is to set aflame the photo booth that, of course, Wilder had worked in, and to try to get even with the whole truck thing, because it's like, well, hey, that's for like setting aflame my truck. So with that said, I think that technically goes on and covers everything. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about this film and whatever and what have you. But I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, buddy. Goodbye, buddy.